happy Monday afternoon from an Auckland where the weather has been really quite nice. It finally feels like we're getting some summer with our summer. I had a long weekend. I took an extra day off work to go down to the trails in Rotorua, where I was able to meet up with my friends Troy, Thomas and Mason, and we had a pretty damn good time. So on the Friday when they weren't down, I went and ran around the Redwoods and the Sulphur Flats, and that was pretty cool. And then on the Saturday we all got together and we ran Okataina to Blue Lake, the big one. It was really great to get out and do that. The trail was in fabulous condition and we learned a couple of things. So number one, there's not a lot of wasps out there. Number two, you can run on a trail in road shoes. Most of us ran in trail shoes. My friend Thomas thought he'd give out his Nike Tempo Next percents ago. Now these are very much not trail shoes, given that they have a huge stack height at the heel and they've got a couple of AirPods at the front and they've got a sort of 8 to 10 mil drop. So they're not really built for technical trail. But he went out and ran in these and he had a great time, and he said, you know what, if it's a dry day and conditions are good, I could quite happily consider running much of the Tarawera 102k, which he is doing, in a pair of those. So there you go, you live and you learn. Given that it's now 3 weeks to race day, or more specifically 18 and a half days, given I'm recording this on a Monday, we should probably start to talk about taper. Tapering is just the process where you reduce your overall volume of running into a race to allow your body to recover so you can go into it with the maximum of fitness, the maximum of recovery and the maximum of stamina, and reduces your chances of exploding in a shower of body parts when the whistle goes. I might be exaggerating with that last bit. So, the general idea is if you were running, and let's pick a hypothetical example, say 10 hours per week, you would reduce that to maybe 5 or 6 hours in week 1 of taper. You would then reduce it to, let's say, 4 hours in week 2 of taper. And then the actual race week itself, you do very, very little before the race. Now, the next thing to talk about is intensity. So within that 10 hours, let's say you were running 9 hours easy and 1 hour hard, kind of like my training's been fairly recently, just as you reduced it in that first week of taper to 5 to 6 hours of total volume, which would be 4 to 5 hours of easy work, you need to take that 1 hour of intense work and reduce it by the same amount. So 1 hour would become, I don't know, let's say 25 to 40 minutes, somewhere about that. That would probably be about right. And correspondingly down. So you're reducing the overall volume, but you're maintaining the percentage of time you do hard to be the same total volume in terms of time in your week. So this all sounds very good, but is there evidence for this? Yes, as it turns out there is. So for example, Smyth and Lawlor was a 2021 paper on the structure of tapering, and it said basically that a 3-week taper is probably the best, followed by a 2-week taper, and a structured taper is much better than a kind of let's just reduce our volume a bit kind of taper. So you need to start about 3 weeks out, you need to reduce your volume in a structured way, consistently from let's say 60% down to 40%, down to 10 or 20% on the race week before the race itself, and you maintain roughly the same percentage of intensity work as you go through. Now we do need to be careful about that, because even though it had 158,000 people in that study, it's a retrospective study, so they took data from Strava and other platforms like that, and they looked at what happened. Now with such studies, you cannot prove causation, you can only prove correlation. However, given that there are other studies, which I'll stick in the link below, where they've done prospective studies, which is where you take a group of athletes, you split them into half, you do one half to go and do one thing, and you get another half to do another thing, and you compare the two. So a controlled experiment in that way is called a prospective study, and you can establish both correlation and causation. Given that those exist, it's a pretty good bet that this study of 158,000 people by Smyth and Lawlor is a pretty good guide to how you should taper. There we go. I am absolutely stoked for race day. It's going to be fabulous. I'm looking forward to seeing each and every one of you down there. I hope you're having a fantastic time training and getting out in the weather that has much more recently been a lot better than the rubbish we had over Christmas. So now for a little bit of footage from the long run at Okataina over the weekend. Roll that tape.
Right, we're going to do this thing?
I'm in, yeah, I'm in. I don't even have a GPS on this.
Cool.
Yeah, so you've got the previous...
Western Okataina, here we go.
That's on. lifetime.